What's up, Navigating Academia family? This is your buddy Dr. J. Phoenix Singh coming at you live from Barcelona, Spain to be able to give you a little bit of guidance about how do you deal with self-criticism in academia. Those of you who are already in academia, whether you're a graduate student, a postdoc, a junior faculty member, tenure track faculty member, or even somebody who's getting to the point where you're going to be an emeritus faculty member, something that all of us are kind of struck by is this deep sense of self-criticism. And honestly, this usually comes in terms of this inner voice that is frankly very judgmental. And it does two things. Number one is that obviously it's very beneficial insofar as it really kind of lights a fire under our butt and makes us want to work harder, go further, accomplish more, because academia is something where there's a lot of quote unquote trophies. Right? These trophies can be titles like, oh, I'm the treasurer of the International Association of whatever. Or, if you can, for example, publish in a very high impact journal like Nature and just be like, oh, yes, these are, in English, we would say it's a feather in your cap, right? It's one thing that kind of makes you stand out from all of your colleagues. And we really want these things. We as human beings were naturally built to be able to kind of establish and then live within and strive to grow within hierarchies. And there's not one hierarchy, right? There's all sorts of different, parallel hierarchies. I always joke around about the fact that in my own field, which is what's called forensic risk assessment, there's so many different parallel subfields. So you've got, risk assessment for suicide and self-harm. You got risk assessment for violence in psychiatric populations. You got risk assessment for domestic violence, for sex offenders. We'll be here all day. There's all these parallel fields. And the ironic thing is that within each of those fields, there are different heavy hitter academics. There are different individuals whose work is cited the most. And if you go into that new field, it's so funny, just like because I've been in a lot of those subfields, and the amount of deference that is shown to certain players in each field makes you scratch your head a little bit. Because, for example, if I, use one of my, favorite buddies in my field, his name is Robert Hare, right? And I've known Bob for 20 some odd years now. And you guys would have no idea who the F I'm talking about, right? Maybe a few of you guys who want to be in forensics, but for the most part, you guys would have no idea. But in my field, it's like if you didn't have an idea, it'd be like, really? So he's the guy who developed this thing called the Psychopathy Checklist Revised, where if you know what a psychopath is and I know what a psychopath is, the likelihood is exceptionally high that the psychopath that we'd both be thinking about would be operationally defined as a psychopath based on the diagnostic tool developed by Bob back in the early 1980s, 1981, 1985, version 1, version 2 of that checklist. So it's one of these things where there's always these players kind of within these fields, and we kind of measure them, right? By putting somebody in that position as being a role model or a hero, we're also inherently making them our judge, as they say, right? Why? Because then if we're moving closer to that status, then it makes us feel good. And if we're not moving closer to that status, it makes us feel bad. So it's almost like by putting somebody in that role model position, it is also essentially making this a case where we kind of give them carte blanche, right? We give them free rein to be able to also reconfigure ourselves neurologically insofar as what provides or produces negative and positive affect. And so why is this important at all to be able to mention, right? Because oftentimes, especially if it's something where maybe we're a little bit younger, right? And when I say immature, I don't mean that you're acting like a child. When I say immature, I mean a lack of experience in these sorts of things. Oftentimes what can happen is that we can end up using a really immature defense mechanism. And this immature defense mechanism is honestly to beat the shit out of ourselves psychologically, right? So the amount of harshness and criticism can be quite pronounced. Right? So Daria and I were talking about this last night, actually. So Daria and I are finally together, oh my God, in the same geographic location now long term. Thank God. It's great to have her here. And the thing that we were talking about yesterday is how some people are so hard on themselves. And I disclosed to her that when I was in my 20s in academia, I not only was I super, super driven, but I didn't have any of the types of accomplishments I've got now. of like 90 articles, 5 books, all these successes under, my belt, serving on task forces, editor-in-chief of a journal, like these things. I didn't have any of them. So I had to push and push and push, and the amount of headwinds against me were so high. But instead of projecting it out and being like, this is bullshit, instead, the way that it ended up happening for me was almost like I was bullshit. I wasn't working hard enough. I wasn't getting the job done. And so I would call myself like an effing piece of shit, right? So I'd be like, get to the gym, Singh, you effing piece of shit. Like, what's wrong with you? Let's go, right? And it was meant to almost, I know it sounds crazy, like be supportive, to be able to say something like that to myself. And I know that this isn't just me, because I've had lunch here before I left America with a number of friends and colleagues and mentees of mine who have all said the same thing insofar as the harshness of their self-talk. All this changed for me back in 2017 when I ended up selling my first company. And once I sold the company, I couldn't get this thing to stop in terms of being so harsh on myself, and I wanted it to stop. So what I ended up doing was I ended up making a choice to read this one book, and in the book it said, I forget the book to be honest, but the book said, no one will ever speak to you as often as you speak to yourself. So be kind, right? Be kind to yourself. At the end of the day, so many of us, especially in the behavioral health sciences like psych, nursing, and so forth, we gain joy by losing ourselves in the lives of others. But, we have to treat ourselves like somebody we're responsible for taking care of at the end of the day, right? And so that's the reason why it's really, really important to be able to take time every day to just be deeply appreciative of yourself, the things that you've accomplished, and to recognize that you're somebody who does deserve, right, your own help. Sometimes I'll go to the gym, I don't know about you, and I don't have a personal trainer, right? Back in the States I did, here I don't, right? You go to the gym and you just think to yourself, like, God, like I don't have a trainer or whatever, like I'm screwed, without realizing that it's like, honestly, the best trainer you can have after you know all the fundamentals from a trainer, you're the best person, right? You're the best coach. You're the one who can make yourself feel the best and the most motivated, and you know that you're good, and you know that even if you're not exactly where you want to be, that you're going to get there, right? And so it's really, really important to be able to adopt that personality, to be able to adopt that piece of yourself, and to be able to bring it with you, not just into the gym, but into academia as well. There's enough times that your work is going to get rejected, or you're not going to get the grant, or your conference presentation is going to be rejected. And it's really easy in that immature defense mechanism to basically just essentially psychologically try to destroy yourself by yelling at yourself, by, kind of, if you have imposter syndrome, which we talked about in other videos, the imposter syndrome can flare up, right? I really don't want those things, guys, to be able to happen for you. So it's best to just be kind for yourself. The way that I did that for myself is that I shifted my language. So instead, when things were getting really crazy, of calling myself an effing piece of shit, instead I changed it to calling myself a silly goose, which is what, like, my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Slaughter, shout out Mrs. Slaughter, used to say, right, about just being a silly goose. I find that when I say that to myself, and I actually say it to myself, like daily, right, be like, God, Singh, you're being such a silly goose on that, instead of, God, Singh, you're being a fucking piece of shit about that, right? By being calm and relaxed about these things, it does end up making it kind of more playful, but in a way that also is serious, because you don't need to use those harsh words with yourself to be able to communicate with yourself in a way that is effective, right? So maybe next time something crazy happens, you really want to beat yourself up, just try calling yourself a silly goose, and comment down below and let me know how it works, okay? All right, guys, God bless you. I hope you're having a great day. Sign off from Barcelona from Dari and I'll talk to you soon.